Cool. Welcome. Thanks for coming, Jack.
Thanks,
Good
Glenn.
to meet you.
Great to be here.
Tell us who you are and what your brand is.
Yeah, so I'm Jack, one of the co-founders of Ember, and we are a meat snack brand, pardon me, that focuses on sourcing, using animal products that are sourced from certain types of farms, and obviously come on to that a bit more later. Sure. So yeah, you'd find us in major retailers like Waitrose, Sainsbury's, and a few more to come this year. And we also have a strong online business as well. So yeah, that's us.
Okay, so Ember Snacks on meat snacks, but and you're quite sort of mass market in that you're retailing through big, supermarket retailers, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we were obviously having a bit of a chat before this, and that is definitely one of the differences between our two businesses, that we are more mainstream than say someone like Ethical Butcher. You guys have
you're just ahead of us.
A big basket spend, on and probably a set of really engaged followers who are very knowledgeable about meat. And for us, it's slightly different. We've got different drivers of why someone might pick us up. Yeah. That kind of has some different emphasis, but to tell you a bit more about Ember,
let's backtrack and tell me the founder's story. Where did it all come from?
So, my brother is my business partner, and we're actually farmers' sons as well. Right. But not no animals in our lives. It was all potatoes and barley and wheat. But there's a strong connection of food from a young age there, and we were into deer stalking, all those sort of things. We actually now have a wild venison product, but so we kind of schemed from young years. It was always going to turn out. I think we were going to end up doing something together. In a previous life before Ember, we actually both worked in the food industry.
Okay, what was that?
I worked for a company called Hilton Foods, which did kind of large scale, supplying one of the retailers. Meat was their core business. There's a Hilton Water. No, not that. No, there's a few Hiltons there,
okay.
Hotels, Hilton Water, yeah. But and Harry worked in branded as a commercial guy there. We're both commercial backgrounds, but in slightly different style businesses. But Vita Coco is the business he worked for.
Coconut water.
The coconut water,
right.
Yeah. So
you had a good sort of commercial sort of, this is how a food brand works before you started your own.
Yeah.
So I can imagine conversations. What are we going to do? Where did the idea for Ember come from then?
Yeah, we're both pretty active guys, and we were doing triathlon training. And one of the foods that and our business started is built on. I'll come on to in a second how things have evolved. And we always, being farmer sons, we had aspirations for our meat to be British and Irish, and it still is today, on the biltong, but sourced in a certain way. And on the journey after the first 12 months of kind of trading, we realised unless we sat down and wrote down some really clear standards, it was always going to be hard to get to a certain level. Yeah. And that's when we sat down, we kind of wrote our value proposition, or what some people call their vision, of what are the kind of fundamental values of the business and the direction that we want to go in. And we know that, we were aware, and I think the world was becoming more and more aware that meat can be extremely destructive to the environment, or both in biodiversity
or beneficial,
terms, or beneficial, and that was kind of the journey of discovery that where we kind of, through a lot of research, tried to get down to what we thought the core problem was in.
But can I backtrack a bit? So why? So you guys have food industry. Your brother was working for a coconut water brand and whatever. So you had a clean slate. What made you think I'm going to do a meat snack? What sort of?
I think when we looked at we love the products. We eat meat. So it was a snack that fitted the bill, high in protein, delivered really tasty, and from
low volume.
Not that we're calorie counts at all, but it's it's a salty product, but apart from that, it's very, very healthy, you know.
Yeah.
And if you're doing a lot of training, salt's not necessarily a bad thing anyway.
Sure. Yeah.
So you know, you'd find a lot of people who.
So you're getting electrolytes and protein with kind of minimal calories, but you're fueling your training.
I mean, yeah, I guess also from a more practical perspective, we're not serious athletes, but. You know, and so we'd be partial to eating some sweets and chocolate now and again, and that's a good alternative too. And I think the reality is obviously there's the aspiration, there's you know, the serious athletes out there, but a lot of people who are active people, you know, are trying to balance lots of different things in their lives, and so you know, snacking is in massive growth because people's lives get busier and busier.
So you're just thinking about that then. So you've got. You said your retail packs are £2, right?
Yeah.
And that's how many, so it's maybe a little bit more expensive than a chocolate bar, but how many calories are in one of your packets as opposed to like?
It depends on the product, but around 100 calories.
Okay. So
and it fills you up as well, importantly.
That's because it's high protein, right? So that's going to have a very different effect than like chugging a Snickers or something. Or,
yeah.
You know, like.
Yeah, it would. And I think, you know, it's a healthy for a snack. It's healthy by our definition, and it's real food as well. It's pretty simple ingredients. So we liked it. We were fans of the product. We looked at the category and we thought, we can do something different here, and that was some of the inspiration that led us into the first products that we launched, which was Biltong.
Okay. So can I just ask a question there? Is there a difference between Biltong and jerky and your product?
Yeah, I mean, well, interesting you say that. There is, yes. Right. But ultimately, if you were South African or American, you'd know pretty clearly the distinction. I think.
Is that the main distinction then, where it comes from? Or?
The one's cooked, jerky's cooked, and you use sugar to sweeten it. Okay. Biltong is savoury. There's no sugar. I mean, some people add a bit of sugar, but on the whole, it's cured. It's dried over a period of time, so you kind of get the flavour from the curing. But to be honest, you know, we're not in our country. If people, those that like a meat snack, they like a meat snack, and they'll call jerky Biltong and Biltong jerky. Yeah, right. I think you know, the big distinction is one's got quite a bit of sugar in, probably as much sugar as, or you know, 24 to 25 grams per 100 grams of sugar. It's a lot.
That's quite a lot. Yeah.
So anyway, that's where we started, and kind of what drew the inspiration for the focus of our business still today is the charcuterie range, which they're minced products, and that was like an important realization when we sat down and wrote our value proposition, which is end factory farming in the meat industry. So that's like the vision, the long term. So
minced products, so like salami type products, that kind of thing. Is that what you mean? But then, so the great thing about that, of course, for a brand working at scale, is that you have access to you're using more of the animal. You're not just saying we only need that cut.
That's exactly it. Right. Yeah. So as soon as you need to balance the carcass, which you guys will be familiar with, exactly, is challenging. To kind of get over that challenge, to be able to work with a smaller number of farmers, mincing, you obviously mince. Not necessarily the whole animal every time, but it utilises much more of the animal.
Got you.
And so that was like for the innovation that came after the 12 months. Getting a product that was minced was kind of one of the key things that we wanted to.
So what is your minced product? Is it like salami that's then sliced and dried?
It's a salami process. We use salami cultures. It is, by all accounts, you know, salami style. We are slightly tentative about calling it salami because everyone thinks salami, I think, really high in fat, and what we've done is blended it with quinoa, which replaces fat. Wow. And it was through a lot of trial and error, to be honest, that we got to that.
Right. That's all right. We'll just
style it.
Someone coming through.
So quinoa, amazingly, they use it in some sausage production.
Right. Well, it's super high protein in itself, right?
Well, it's high in fibre. Yeah, it's high-ish in protein, but it's from a textural point of view, it means that you can have, you know, if you have low fat with a minced product, it often starts to, you know, like a burger, starts to fall apart.
Exactly. Yeah. And it doesn't have the same sort of mouthfeel as well. There'll be definitely an effect there.
Yeah, and so we have a bit of fat in our products, but we can significantly. All the tests that we've done is between 50 and 60% less fat than if you were to use a salami style process. So,
are you sourcing, there's like some UK grown quinoa now?
Yeah, so we use the British quinoa.
You do? Amazing. It's from Hodmedod's?
There's two. There's the British quinoa company and Hodmedod's. We know both those guys. We actually source with the British quinoa company. But
I think the guy who is behind the British quinoa company, I think he's also Great Berwick Organics. I think we buy beef from him as well.
Could well be.
I think, or he's certainly involved in that anyway. Yeah. But I find that really interesting. This whole, because there are these kind of high protein grains and pulses, but most of them come from other parts of the world.
Yeah. That was a really important piece.
The politics of getting them into the UK is not great, because often the farmers are paid poorly, it's taking away their natural food source, and there's a lot of criticism for things like quinoa and avocados of the effect it has on their country of origin. Yeah. So it's really good to hear.
Well, that's why,
getting British sourced.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's kind of it all flows back to the principles that we have around sourcing, and it's complicated to source food well, isn't it? And it's hard to eat food well and to be purist about it.
Well, especially when you get multiple ingredients in one product, because that's when it gets, we're super lucky in that we pretty much we have the odd, bit of salt, pepper and chili in things to, as seasonings, but generally we're buying one product from one farm. But when you're manufacturing like you guys are, and you've got to consider the impact of, everything, it's exponentially more difficult.
Yeah, and I mean, luckily we only have a few, we kind of have, it's not dissimilar apart from the quinoa to you, and that's it. So meat is the big ingredient. Quinoa, we're sort of British quinoa company, and then we have a bit of seasoning. But it's mainly with charcuterie. There's obviously a culture. You're kind of using kind of age-old techniques really to cure it, and using time, humidity, temperature to bring out those kind of rich flavors really. So that's the charcuterie range, and we have a one beef, one pork, one venison. All of them have their kind of own sourcing credentials really, and again we discussed this a little bit before our call, but before the podcast, but slightly differently to you guys, although a huge amount of synergy. You guys, your central focus is regenerative, and a regenerative we would hold dear to our heart, but it's not what makes our sourcing principles. It's kind of like, is the benchmark for us is this product factory farmed from a meat perspective. So we'd call our beef regeneratively farmed. We've sourced from some similar farms with you guys. And our pork, we have Dingley Dale, they put aside 50% of their land to they sow kind of essentially
a really complex wildflower meadows, exactly. Right, for pollinators.
Yes, and so the focus for that is what they call the Million Bee Project.
Yeah.
But you only need to go there on a spring or summer, and you realise they measure with the wildlife grids. And the amount of different bee species in a metre square, it is like inspiration when you go and see that. Similarly, I'm sure when you guys go to farms and you see some of our beef farmers.
The incredible, when you go in the middle of the summer and the pasture is kind of up to here, and you're kind of, you're up to there before you get to the soil. And
it's those stories that we find inspiring internally, and when you look at the total meat industry, the massive
we're talking the tip of the pyramid, aren't we, for the methods of farming? But
it can be so beneficial. I know this is what your business is about and our business is about, but you look at how some meat is sourced, and when you go and see those farms in actions, the comparatives, if you don't know where your meat's coming from, or it's coming, either all around the world, or when you can't track it back to a farm, the chances are that a good chunk of that has come from the conventional supply chain, which is geared towards
volume,
efficiency,
price,
above everything else. And
so I'm just trying to understand. So it sounds like you've got a set of brand values, which is very much moving towards regenerative, but that's not maybe necessarily represented in your consumer-facing end of the brand, or
how do you tie
those together?
It's different to. it's different for you, like, you know, everything for your consumer facing brand. What's important for people making a meat purchase for you is the way that it's sourced, right?
Yeah.
You know, that's we love that, and if we probably could, if we wanted to talk about it more, some people might not be engaged by that, because, you know, the important things for us with a more mainstream customer is, does the product taste great, obviously, and that's obviously tied in with quality, which sourcing from the right farms helps bring that. Price, which is obviously an important metric. If you're shopping in a supermarket, people are going to be more price sensitive, and health. So taste, health, price, we say they're the three big drivers of why someone would pick up our product.
Yeah.
And then we have our sourcing principles, which is what's important to our business, and obviously increasingly important to more people in the UK.
Yeah, that's super. I find that really interesting, though, is that you're managing to deliver a product at a competitive price, competitive taste, you know, and with health benefits, but that the ethics are not the sort of consumer-driven brand focus. They're a sort of they're the core underneath, if you like.
They are. That would be the thing that never changes in our business.
That's super interesting, though. So you're still working on this, what we call, you know, the model of continuous improvement, where you're trying to make things a little bit better. You're trying to source. You're trying to work with your producers, presumably, to say, you know, like you described Dingley Dell. You know, we know those guys. We know what they're doing. It's pretty good, and I think they're on a bit of a journey themselves as well. But yeah, interesting that it's kind of, you're able to deliver a competitive product without making a big deal about the provenance. It's like an underground thought process.
Well, I mean, I think, yes, that's true to a point. I guess our recognition, we need to recognise that these are at the point of purchase in a supermarket. Those three things I mentioned are paramount. But sourcing is a differentiator as well. It's important to, you know, that story of when people engage and trust in brands is really important, and hopefully we would like to think that has those values, that's meaningful for our customers, and a reason why they would, when they find out more about us, they might stay and buy us again, because they know that hopefully we're, compared to the shelf version, we're confident we would be to the likes of, you know, Pepperami and Madison's. We're sourcing in a way, and that makes you realise, you know, we're not necessarily identical target markets, but we're sat next to them on the shelf. So the centre ground really is taste, health, price at the shelf edge, and then our values, and that's not to say that it's not important to. It's important to a segment of our customers, without a doubt. And then I think it's probably a nice to have, and hopefully a reason that they'll come back once they know more about the story.
But I'd imagine you've got two customers. I'm imagining. I mean, you've probably got the impulse buy, which is point of sale, checking out. I'm a bit hungry. That looks good in the basket. And then the people who will order a box off your website because they know you and trust you. So it's kind of connecting those two together, right? Or it's making the impulse buys into the trusted customers.
Definitely, and it's important to, you know, retention of customers and growing that base is important for any kind of startup food business or any business on the whole, really. But you're right. There's quite often. For us in the retail form, it is more of an impulse, probably less thoughtful purchase than maybe going to an ethical butcher website to buy your meat. Is less emotive.
Right, got you. Like I say, so once you've maybe picked up a customer through an impulse buy, and they sort of want to look at the brand and peel back the layers of the onion and see what you're about. Is that the level at which your sourcing and ethics will become kind of more available to them, rather than being sort of on the pack in their face?
You know, it's still, along with protein, or, you know, if we talk about the key drivers, prices are given, taste, and this is the thing, they're also linked, you know, taste, quality, or where we're sourcing from. That is, quality means taste to a lot of a lot of customers. If they're getting a good feeling of quality from the comms, which, you know, if you were to look at our front of pack, sourcing does come through strongly. So it's not like it's not there at all. It definitely is, but they're helping to reinforce this is a quality product sourced in a certain way, and I think that helps reinforce taste. And obviously health is then really important. I mentioned the fact that we're 50 to 60 or 50+% less fat than other products on the shelf. So I always think front of pack is a good way to work out in our world what's important to a brand and probably important to their customers, because they're going to be getting those most important bits on front of pack, and our sourcing is there. So it's not to say that it's not important. We're probably balancing.
I'm with you.
More things.
So, you've mentioned a few times the sort of health aspect of, high protein, particularly, for athletes. This is something I kind of dialed into a little while ago. I was looking at, and I wrote an article about, how much protein should older men be taking into their diets, because I think a lot of the guidelines are actually too low, particularly for people who are very active. Have you ever sort of messed around with balancing macros, keto? Because you guys are endurance athletes, aren't you? So more than I. So
we're amateur athletes.
Okay, but you're doing endurance-based sports, right? Which is like the opposite, like we discussed before, to me, where I'm a sort of boulderer. Give me 6 moves and I'm done, kind of thing. Yeah. You're planning to run the length of the country in the end of March. That's a whole different proposition. But protein and keeping a high protein intake, I'm a bit older than you, but it's super, super important. And a lot of people aren't getting enough. And if you want to keep muscle mass into your older age, we really do need to kind of keep your protein levels up.
I think exactly. Certainly it's important. I think a certain amount of protein's important in everyone's diet. What I think is good about protein or meat snacking is it delivers taste. And it's naturally high in protein. And obviously, if you don't have a ton of fat in there, then you have a healthy product that delivers on taste. And in a world that we live in, where we're geared to want fat and sugar and salt. That's what our body thousands of years ago made it. That was high in calories, so that was great. And now we're obviously living in the modern world, so it's hard. You're constantly trying yourself, discipline.
Tricking. It's almost like a sort of you're tricking your body, because it is tasty and it's satiating, but relatively low in calories as a result of just being lean protein. And protein is the least caloric of the 3 macros,
and it fills you up, right? So protein's great, and meat's naturally high in protein. It has lots of other benefits around the side in terms of omegas and other nutrients. So it's nutrient dense, which is great. But I think the thing I like about meat snacks, and it's a category. Unfortunately, it's growing with people that are sourcing in certain ways that might not be aligned with us. But there is a huge it's one of the strongest going categories on the shelf edge, which kind of sounds funny when you hear like a really noisy plant-based movement, but it is trailblazing in that, and that's what people are trying to make healthier choices from a time poor perspective. And meat snacks is great.
Well, you don't need to cook anything.
It's only 100 to 150 calories for a pack. It's high in protein,
and you're getting that little hit of protein. And there's no preparation. You're not dealing with a raw product. You don't have to worry about spoilage or anything like that. So it's kind of super convenient.
And so you see there's a really strong organic growth in our category where we are in the retail kind of fixture. We'd like to think that we are well placed as a brand to ride that wave, but also encourage people to trade up to something that has minimal impact on the environment. Or you look at some of the farms that we source from, and you go there and you're thinking, how can people think it's bad to it's
we're buying from some of the same beef farms.
We are. And I mentioned it earlier, but and as you did, you're going around flowering meadows that is just rich with
up to your waist in plants and buzzing things, and
and that's obviously, you can talk about locking up carbon, but purely from a biodiversity and wildlife perspective, you don't get that from conventional conventional agriculture. You know, I grew up on a conventional farm, but that's before people realised the impact that it was having on wildlife and biodiversity. But you know, the conventional way of farming needs to, you know, and is with all the policy change that's coming our way, has to go through some massive changes. And the way that animals are farmed also needs to. Hopefully, we're on the kind of front foot of of that movement.
I'd like to think so. And you know, before we were rolling the cameras and we were chatting next door, you said that we're all really at the very beginning of this, you know, movement of regenerative agriculture. And I guess sort of sometimes I forget that because it's what our whole business is founded on, but it is really kind of early days for all this stuff. It's not really, you know, it's not really percolated into the mainstream. But what I find really interesting about your brand in particular is that you're a more mainstream brand than we are, but you're on that path, bringing it in without necessarily being massively shouty about it. And this, even the term regenerative agriculture, last week, for the first time ever, I saw it on a billboard. As I was riding into work, I saw a billboard and it just caught the corner of my eye. And it turns out it was for a conference with food brands and regenerative agriculture. But it's the first time I'd ever seen the term regenerative agriculture in a sort of public-facing outdoor media advertisement, and that was like I thought it's a turning point.
It has to be, and it is going to be a mass movement. There's you know, agricultural practices have to change from the way that they are currently to something that is more, and regenerative being a pretty loose term, but if we call it like, you know, benefiting biodiversity and increasing soil health and hopefully looking at carbon. If you get roughly those things, it has to happen for the future of the world, really, doesn't it?
So it should become, I mean, I'd like to see a point where it becomes the norm, not the exception. You know, like almost like you're shaming brands for not being regenerative without shouting at the ones that are, because it should become the way that all farming's done.
And it's a long way to go, obviously, to get to that point, but
you know, something else when we were, you know, again, when we were talking next door off camera, is that, you know, we talked about the fact that your beef probably is, your beef is sourced from regenerative farms.
And if you use that same definition of does it tick biodiversity and you know, benefits soil health,
tick.
And we'd, you know, you know, you take something like pigs, and we do have a different sourcing protocols, but which is, has this come from factory farming in the meat industry? That's kind of the benchmark. We have a framework that we score stuff. You have certain products that score better than others, and it's about continuous improvement, as you said. But you know, take pigs for example. I wouldn't call them the pig farm Dingley Dell regenerative, because to commercially farm pigs, you have to have it on such an extensive scale. You could probably only have 10, 20, 30, 40 pigs over thousands of acres to do it and not affect soil health, because they like farrowing. But why we really like Dingley Dell is they're putting aside 50% of their land to plant that helps you know, encourage wildlife.
What they're doing is probably as close as it's possible to get at scale at the moment.
We like to think so,
without being. The thing about cattle, grazing animals, is you don't need to give them external feed, right? They can imagine this table's a field, they can live and you move them around and the pasture grows and everything's good, but pigs aren't grass fed, they only get a portion of their diet from the land and the rest you need to feed them. And to me, the crucial thing is, what are you feeding them? Where's it coming from? And how is it produced? Because once you sort of take away the isolated system, you're adding so much more complexity into deciding whether it's regenerative or not. So even if the movement of the pigs, for example, we were sourcing a while ago from a pig farmer who was using them to clear ancient woodland. So ancient woodland that was overgrown with ivy and nettles and brambles, and you put the pigs through, and it's like someone's gone in with a strimmer and fertilised it. And then as long as you keep moving them regularly enough, then the native forest, the oak and the ash and the beech and the apple trees that are in the forest get a chance to grow, because you're taking away the competition, you're churning up the roots, you're adding nutrition. But you can do that with 50, 60 or 100 pigs. You can't do it with 3,000 pigs on scale. So
and so that's where we also have a slightly because of the nature of your business, you can work with
we can be
a smaller number of farms.
Yeah.
And for us, that kind of model wouldn't work. But before we decided which farms we worked out, we got to the value proposition or our vision, which is end factory farming in the meat industry, as I said, and that helps. That then set the framework. Say these are our standards.
So that's like step one. Yeah.
I mean, we'd like to say that's step 1, 2, 3, 4. That's our vision. We're never going to change that, and that means working with farms that farm regeneratively, and also it means not factory farming.
Yeah.
You know?
But are you feeding back? Are you talking to your producers and saying, is there any chance you could do this? Can you change that, or is there room for improvement here?
I think our challenge is finding, because there's a lot of amazing farmers out there already doing it, and there's farms. There's one particular farmer in Scotland who I was speaking to, and he sells his cattle into regenerate into conventional. And as lots do, as you'll know.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole array of farmers that is in the UK, from people that are doing, from our perspective, an amazing job, and some that are doing it in a less favourable way.
Yeah. No, you're right. There's a lot of CFLA and regenerative farmers who are selling their meat into the mass market, be it Morrison's, Waitrose, whatever.
Yeah.
And the product's not being differentiated when it hits, which I think is a real pity. I think the supermarkets themselves are missing a trick there of not putting this stuff as a premium for the impact it's having. But
well, that's the jobs of the likes of you and I, would guess, because
But I want to see this go bigger than us, as I'm sure you do.
It's a timing thing, isn't it? And we're right at the beginning of it. And I think, without a doubt, we still have close contacts with people in the world in supermarkets, and obviously we interface with them. They are very aware of and interested in regenerative, want to do pilots for. So it could, and I'm sure it will, but it's a matter of time, and things can't happen overnight. Probably businesses like ours, and often it is the way, brands need to create the noise and make it mainstream, and then retain
the smaller brands than the big supermarkets. You mean
what you call the challenger brands. They're
right.
challenging a category. They're challenging a status quo, and that's the jobs of the likes of our businesses.
Not Sainsbury's, Waitrose, Morrison's, whatever.
Well, they could try, but they probably wouldn't have success. And they're busy servicing the
different market,
the mainstream. But hopefully, in years to come, regenerative will be something that we see on shelf edges as kind of standard, I guess.
Fingers crossed.
The equivalent of the Tesco Finest range or something. It'd be nice to think about that. But I suppose the only other area that kind of links back to the factory farming piece we haven't spoken about is, we have a wild venison product, which I
wanted to come to that.
So to be honest, it was a bit of a outsider. When we launched it.
So what is the product? Is it like a cured product, or is it a biltong?
So we have one beef, one pork, one venison. You could find them next to the kind of pepperami and massins in that cooked meat.
But is it a strip? Like
it's sliced, like a salami slice, a healthy salami slice.
But it's a minced salami that's okay.
Yeah, and but we launched that product, and this is what's interesting. We launched it as kind of, we thought, from a sourcing perspective, we think it's like the best of the best, because venison is under-eaten. Wild venison is under-eaten, and we have too many deer in the UK, so it's effectively a pest. And it's also delicious, really healthy meat.
Yeah, high, good omegas, selenium, all kinds of stuff in there. But I think venison is possibly the most regenerative meat that we can have, because if you don't kill it, if we don't cull venison, it's having a negative impact on the environment. So
exactly.
In terms of,
it's nibbling away all the new growth in a forest.
Well, also they'll decimate crops as well, because there's we have to take the place of the apex predator within that system.
Exactly.
And most of them are, as you said, I think you described them as an invasive species. They were introduced to the UK on the whim of landowners who wanted to look at these things kind of wandering across their land. And now they've just proliferated, and we need to get rid of them. So I completely agree. We source Parkland venison, which I think is, in some ways, it's the best of both worlds, because it's wild,
Slightly
but it's contained, so you know what it's eaten. So we know that it hasn't been munching on some like glyphosate sprayed crops, or you know.
Right. So that's what was kind of important when you were.
It was kind of important for us, in that we have that sort of, and yet it's not farmed, because I don't see why anyone would kind of farm venison in the UK when we've got.
I agree.
The only reason for farming, I think, is to get around the gap in the year when you're not.
There's kind of no
when it's out of season,
in my opinion, of farming something that you got too many of.
Exactly. It'd be like farming signal crayfish or something stupid, when they're decimating all the rivers in the UK.
But so on the venison, which was a kind of a bit of an outside chance. We thought might be almost like good for press, but who knows what was going to happen to it. And really interestingly, and I'm keen to tell you the story about, we launched the products and we thought beef and pork would definitely be the best sellers. Venison's pretty much tip and toe with the other products, but often and was for a while our best selling product, but
Wow.
And then you think, okay, fine, we're selling in what would be like a mainstream forum within retail, but then that shows people's appetite for to try something new.
I'm super surprised, and I'm really pleased to hear that, because my own experience, I didn't eat meat for 25 years. I don't know if you sort of know my backstory, but I was a very, very long-term vegetarian. And then when I started eating meat again about 6 or 7 years ago, I wanted to like dive in and try everything. And I was very concerned about ethics. And I remember going to my local farmer's market in Queen's Park, and there was a guy selling venison, and he kind of went, "Do you want venison?" I'm like, "No, I don't, because it tastes like an old boot that's been dragged out of the canal." And he sort of went, "Oh, that's like, you probably had it as a kid and it was like a rotting old stag that they had to hang for too long, and then it was basically half off." And
it's my favourite meat.
And he sold me a loin of venison, and he said it's relatively unhung. He said, "I'm here next week. If you don't like it, I'll give you money back." So, well, fair enough. And he told me how to cook it, and it was phenomenal. It was like the most delicate sort of fillet steak I'd ever tasted. And that was a bit of a sort of turning point for me. It's like, venison doesn't have to be this funky, gamey kind of, it's actually a very clean, very lean meat. But I do think the general public, it's super encouraging to hear, because obviously we've launched venison as well, but it's very encouraging to hear that people are making an impulse buy at the supermarkets of venison, which I consider to be kind of a hard sell.
But I mean, and also when you strip it back, you realise there's people who are buying that venison, for example, they're looking, when we've spoken to we do regular customer interviews, they're looking for something new and different. And so there's a massive over-index with foodies, but who doesn't, or it's very hard, I still do a supermarket shop, who doesn't do part of their shop with a supermarket still, because that's the way that our whole country is geared. And I'm sure there's people that don't, but the vast majority of people will, and you'll get real foodies, really like people who care about where products come from, and so I guess that's why they're still in the supermarkets.
But I guess what you're doing different to us, which is kind of a genius way of introducing someone to a new meat, is you're giving it to them in a ready-to-eat packet. Whereas we're selling them an ingredient that they have to cook with that they might be unfamiliar with. Which is why, like, what you're doing could really help feed the greater good of like us trying to sell this invasive species. So I like the sort of synergy there. That's good, and I think it makes me think that for us to promote venison more, we maybe need to get you guys to do some curing for us or something, or we need to make it in a more available form so people can taste it and go, actually, this is really good. I need to maybe dive a bit deeper.
I mean, that's the other thing which comes back to like taste. It's such a distinctive, rich, gamey taste. And so, we talk about the drivers in our category, or for all food products, taste is always going to be in the mix, isn't it? And
but in your product, is it gamey? Because when I've had venison that we've had from the farm, from our estate, and it's been only hung for a couple of weeks, and it's not always like the old animals. I find it really delicate. Like it's got a tiny bit.
I'd say ours is rich.
Yours is rich.
Describe it. Not some people would describe it as gamey, but I get rich. I get like a
just umami kind of thing. All right, savoury rich rather than having a sort of funk to it.
I'm getting hungry now talking about it, to be honest.
But
cool.
but yours is cured and it gives it that.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you can cure.
I haven't tried it. I'm going to have to try it.
Really?
Yeah,
I'm sorry about that. We should have got you some samples. I can blame COVID maybe. Yeah. Anyway, is that, are we all done?
Yeah, I think we've kind of rounded things off nicely.
Great.
Is there anything else you want to say? No. Do you want to drop a web link where people can find your brand?
Yeah, of course. So we're embersnacks.com, and hopefully you could put on the link for us.
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
But most major supermarkets from the second half of this year, hopefully.
Thanks.